Welcome into the Diamond Vols Podcast on GoVols247.com. I'm Ben McKee, and I'm joined on this edition of the podcast, a July 7th edition of the podcast, a post-July 4th Diamond Vols Podcast. I'm joined by former Tennessee baseball pitcher Will Heflin to talk about a left-handed pitcher that Tennessee has picked up in the portal. Back-to-back podcasts, Mr. Heflin gets to talk about left-handed pitchers that Tennessee has added. And this time around, it's kind of going off of our conversation we had on the second segment of our pre-July 4th podcast about how we felt Tennessee needed to add left-handed pitching, and Tennessee has certainly done that. We're also going to be joined by Joe Doyle, who covers the draft, the MLB draft, as well as anybody. We're going to be joined by Joe in the second segment. This will be the third straight year, I believe, that we've had Joe on the podcast. So he's a wealth of knowledge and is up to date on everything as it pertains to the draft. And we are locked and loaded with 1,000 Tennessee baseball questions to ask him. So he'll join us here during the second segment. And there's a couple of other topics we have to discuss as well. But first, Mr. Heflin, how was your July 4th weekend?
It was good, man. We had good weather in East Tennessee. It was very hot. Spent most of my time on the lake. No complaints. My furry child, Josie, is a golden retriever, English cream. Does not do well with fireworks. So that was a bit of a struggle. But, I mean, she's 3, so it's her third July 4th. We knew that she would not do it well, so we drugged her a little bit so that she would, relax and sleep. So other than that, great July 4th. It was fun.
Well, good. I'm glad.
How was yours?
It was good. I had a good weekend over in West Tennessee. Hung out around my grandmother's pool practically all weekend long. Snuck into Memphis and got me some ribs from the Rendezvous, which I spoke about. Was very excited, and they lived up to the hype. They're so dang good. The dry rub that they put on their ribs is just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So that was fun. And my pup, my fur child, Judge, who is 6. Yeah, just turned 6 last month, or 6.5, actually. Sorry. I get his gotcha date and his birth date because we don't technically know when he was born. So we think that he was 6 months old when we got him in June of 2019. So I always have to stop and think it out loud, do the math in my head.
Yeah.
Also,
assign him a random birthday.
Yeah, absolutely. Also not a fan of the fireworks. And we give him drugs to try and help, and they do not work. He's a mix between an Australian Shepherd and a Border Collie, and he is just wound up. So that was always fun, especially just wait until if you have kids one day and your kids go to sleep before the fireworks start, and then your dog loses their stuff and you can't corral them at all, and they're just constantly going on and on and on about the fireworks. And like, you can't get mad at the dog. It's not the dog's fault. They're not doing anything wrong. You feel for them, but then you also don't want them to wake up the kids. It's just it's an awful situation, quite frankly. So, and we were out in the country too, where they were shooting them off left and right. I'm sure you were.
Morristown.
As well.
Morristown, all around. The louder the better around there. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tennessee baseball and Tony Vitello continues to have fireworks these last couple of weeks. And as we mentioned on our last podcast, boy, is the pitching staff starting to round into form as we begin to look ahead to the roster next season. The latest addition should be on this Monday is Mark Hindy. I hope I pronounced his last name correctly. Sorry if I did not, Mark, but a left-handed pitcher from Duke. He spent 3 years at William and Mary out of high school. Did not pitch. He pitched once his first 2 seasons. He made 1 appearance during his first 2 seasons at William and Mary. He pitched once as a true freshman and then had to have Tommy John. So missed the rest of his 2023 season when he was a true freshman. He comes back from Tommy John as a redshirt freshman, does not get to throw a pitch because he tears his labrum in his non-throwing arm. So he had Tommy John on his left arm, which he pitches with, and then he tore his labrum in his other arm before he could get to his redshirt freshman season, but then was able to have a very, very productive 2024 season at William and Mary, and then he transfers to Duke last offseason, where another productive season in the ACC, and now he is headed to Tennessee. And what's odd about this one is Mark did not take a single visit anywhere. He did not visit Tennessee. He did not visit any other school, but he did hear from multiple SEC and ACC schools. The ones he talked to the most, in addition to Tennessee, was Florida, Oklahoma, Florida State, and North Carolina. So the numbers don't jump off the page at you, Will, but that's pretty good company Tennessee's recruiting against right there. And again, the numbers don't jump off the page at you, but has been productive at the college level the last two seasons, the ACC this past season. And look, at the end of the day, Tennessee is, I think it's fair to say that they were desperate for left-handed arms in the bullpen, and that's exactly what they got here, is a veteran presence who, and we can get into this a little bit more after we get your initial reaction, but somebody who seems like he's going to have more upside and has some untapped potential that you would think that Tennessee would be able to tap into.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice mix because when you look at it on paper, you're like, okay, it's an established veteran left-handed arm, right? Which is exactly what they needed, especially a bullpen arm. And he's 6'4", 220. So like good frame. There's some upside there. Sounds like even though he's a graduate, has been in college for 4 years, so this will be his 5th year. Not a whole lot of mileage on the arm because of the TJ and the opposite side shoulder surgery that he had. So there's probably still some development to be had there for Frank Anderson and company to tinker with. But it was a high number of appearances. It was in the upper 20s in number of appearances. I'll let you dig into the scouting report a little bit more on the pitch stuff itself. But you get a left-handed arm. You get somebody who's, been there, done that. He's done it at William and Mary. Now he's done it in the ACC for a year. Like, he's, in all likelihood, without knowing the kid and having recruited him personally, it's probably somebody that is going to come in, be zero problem in the classroom, locker room. He's going to handle his stuff, going to be a good, clubhouse type guy. And he's got experience coming into games out of the bullpen. And we talked about it last week. We said, the first priority has got to be probably 2 lefties, right? If we had it our way, be 2. Well, now they've gotten 1. So it was much needed. I kind of like the mix between, okay, you've got some established veteran traits, and you've also got some upside for maybe a breakout year and having, the best numbers that he's had in college so far. Because it seems like, even though it was the non-throwing arm, a labrum surgery is a brutal recovery. Tommy John is really, to be fully removed from it, you probably need 2 years to feel like it's kind of completely behind you. You're pretty much back to your full velocity and stuff like that by a year and a half. We kind of saw that with AJ Russell. But I was somebody who went through it, and it's really a kind of a 2.5 year period to where you feel like it's totally behind you. You're never thinking about it, and you feel like your pitch ability, just the command and how you feel and how you recover, it is a longer process. And so he's kind of towards the end of that. Could be a nice timing deal, not just for him, but for Tennessee. So I think it makes total sense. And we'll certainly touch on it more, but probably need another one either similar to that or maybe a less proven but really high upside type left-handed arm. But it was Blanco from the left side and then freshman. So it's like you had to get somebody. This checks those boxes.
Yeah, and the other one was a two-way player in Blaine Brown, who is going to get an opportunity to pitch, and he's going to be considered one of the left-handed options in the bullpen for Tennessee. But as we talked about when Blaine Brown committed from Rice, the bat is ahead of the glove. And if you have championship aspirations, Blaine Brown may blow up in your face, and this may prove to not be a concern. He has that type of potential in the arm. But when you have championship aspirations, it's not smart to go into the season from a roster construction standpoint to rely on Blaine Brown, because you don't know what you're going to get from Blaine Brown, the pitcher. You know what you're going to get from him at the plate. You have no idea what you're going to get from him on the mound, and that is a concern, and why you need to add a couple of guys, even if he is going to be a true two-way player for you. I'm very optimistic about this addition for Tennessee. I know I do tend to be more optimistic than not. I am a glass half full person, but there's a couple of reasons why. First, in terms of what pitches he throws a four-seam fastball, a cutter, a slider, a changeup. He told me that the cutter and the slider are probably his two favorite pitches to throw, although he does love when he can sneak a fastball by a hitter, which I'm sure you can relate with as well, but did acknowledge that the slider and the cutter are his two best pitches. The fastball is 89 to 92, and getting into the two reasons that I think that fans should be intrigued by this pickup, excited about this pickup more than the numbers would suggest, is because he had this quote to me, Heflin, when I talked to him, that he's never had a developmental coach in any regard. So he's looking forward to being able to get to work with somebody like a Frank Anderson, a Josh Reynolds, who helps out Frank Anderson and help maximize his potential. And he said that he's always underutilized his lower half and has not utilized his lower half consistently. So he believes that there is untapped velocity because he has not gotten into his legs and his lower half and worked with that as much as he should. And he feels like with a couple of mechanical tweaks, just some small things, that he feels like he can get the ball to jump a little bit more. And obviously, I'll let you go a little more in depth on why he has what exactly that means to the common baseball fan. But then also the other thing that I really like about him is that he's going to be able to fill multiple roles. He's a lefty, so he's going to be asked to get lefties out. But if you go back and look at what he did when he was at William and Mary, it was like 20-something appearances, but he pitched 60 innings. So this is a guy that can be – he's this year's Dylan Loy is what he is going to be. He's probably going to have his outings where it's one hitter, 2 to 3 hitters. He's probably going to have outings where he goes 3 or 4 innings. So I think that provides a lot of value as well. And then something that you mentioned, I noticed while speaking to him on the phone, is that he seems like a real nonsense type of guy. Like, he is all about his business. And I was asking, like, if you didn't take visits anywhere, then why did you feel so comfortable going ahead and committing? And he said that he was pretty selective in the process this time around, and he knew what he was looking for. And this was after I asked him how he ended up at William and Mary out of high school. I'm sure part of it was he was under-recruited, of course, but there's also the factor of he really takes a lot of pride in academics. That's really important to him. And in addition to maybe being a little under-recruited, William and Mary was the best of his options that prioritized both academics and athletics. So again, the numbers aren't Evan Blanco or Landon Mack or some other guys, Brady Frederick, Clay Edmondson, but I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic and excited about this addition.
Yeah, it's a nice addition for those reasons. And to touch on the potential untapped velocity, I mean, anytime you get a guy who's 6'4", over 200 pounds, basic logic would tell you, okay, there's a possibility to throw harder there. Like, it's easier to throw harder if you have more mass and more levers and longer levers. You can, get into the physics all you want. There's short guys that throw hard too, but for the most part, I'd say on average, your taller dudes throw harder. I mean, it's just, that's how it is. I mean, taller guys hit the ball farther, easier to dunk, all those things in golf, drive it longer, stuff like that. So I think, him saying maybe he hasn't got as much out of his lower half, I think that could be a combination of maybe some pitching mechanics things that they can work on in the bullpen, but also maybe just from an athleticism standpoint, like Quentin Eberhardt is so big on explosive movements and lifting as an athlete that a lot of times guys can feel themselves just click better seeing a translation from the weight room over to the mound. And that's where you see some pitchers make jumps in velocity, and they do. The running has shifted, not just at Tennessee, but in baseball kind of philosophy as a whole. Short, explosive sprints versus the longer, cross country style running programs, and that's also lended itself to fast twitch muscles, throwing harder, stuff like that. And so, there's guys like Liam Doyle who would tell you, okay, I took care of my diet, I took care of my arm, I got stronger, I got in better shape, made a velo jump. There's other guys that, hey, I synced up in my mechanics. I took care of my throwing program. I was much more intentional with my long toss, and then my recovery saw a jump from that. And it could come from it's an inexact science. Nobody truly knows, okay, if you do this, this, and this, you'll increase your velocity. Like, it's not that simple. And nobody really knows where their ceiling is. But again, when you're 6'4", you're 89 to 92, and you feel like there's more in the tank, he's probably right. He knows himself. So it'll be interesting to see, a combination of working with Q and Frank in the bullpen and Reynolds, and maybe there's some tweaks mechanically, maybe there's some athletic movements that he gets better at in the weight room, or maybe just running sprints becomes more explosive as a whole, and it kind of syncs up naturally to where he can generate more force and get the ball out of his hand at a higher velocity. Like, there's really no telling, and they've seen guys in that program make jumps recently, so it's definitely on the table. And pretty cool that that's something that he wants to take ownership of as he's going into his fall semester at Tennessee. Because anytime you change your scenery, you're going to get different philosophies, couple different things. But for the most part, like, most baseball training is somewhat similar. There's things out there, certain programs that are really different and really specific. But when you're just talking a college strength training program and conditioning and mechanics and stuff like that, there's generally agreed upon, pillars, if you will. And so maybe a tweak here or there really is, all the difference in the world. But ultimately, it comes down to consistency and doing things enough to really see a difference. And that's one thing he knows for sure he will get at Tennessee, is he's going to be, held accountable to take care of his stuff so that he has the opportunity to make that jump.
And my last thought, another reason Tennessee fans should be excited, and I meant to mention this a moment ago, but went blank. My mind did, is I think Tennessee is getting a very, very motivated player with Mark Hindy, because his numbers, I think, are a little inflated. I think it's a 4.55 ERA this past season at Duke, somewhere around there. And I did not go back and do the math, but he pitched in that Murray State Super Regional in 2 of the 3 games in which Murray State upset Duke, and he allowed 5 earned runs in both of those outings combined and was only able to get 2 outs. And that was something that he talked to me about, of like how I asked him how excited he is to get to Tennessee, pitch in the SEC, get back to Omaha, and he said he's juiced. It's like an itch I'm dying to scratch just because of how our situation wrapped up at Duke this past season. It's an itch that needs to be scratched. So I'm looking forward to it very much, and I think we'll absolutely have a shot to do it. So not only are you getting everything we've already discussed, on top of that, you're getting a very motivated player at the end of his career who's looking to make the next jump and have a professional career. That usually tends to go well, kind of like a contract year, a money year. So a lot to like with Mark Hindy. And again, I didn't do the numbers myself, but I bet if you take out, and not that you should do this or can do this, but if somebody looks at the 4.5 ERA or whatever and is disappointed, I bet if you took out the Murray State performances, that ERA was closer to the upper 3s or around 4. So maybe 2 bad outings there at the very end spoiled what was a really good overall first season in the ACC, which is obviously a good conference. So if you want more Mark Hindy coverage, we should have 4 pieces of content up at the site. I have 3 written stories, him detailing his decision, him explaining why he has this itch that he needs to scratch that I just talked about, and then my usual commitment analysis and what that means with Tennessee baseball. And then, of course, here the podcast. So all the Tennessee baseball coverage you need is at GoVols247.com. Two more things before we get Joe in here. I'm going to put this into a basket and toss it your way. Two topics in one. Dylan Loy commits to Georgia Tech. Luke Payne commits to East Carolina. So a couple of other former Tennessee pitchers on the move. Obviously, the most notable being Dylan Loy and not remaining in the SEC. Initially, the thought was that he was going to South Carolina. I never heard the LSU buzz. I know that was out there, but I never quite heard that. And our Mississippi State writer shot down the Mississippi State buzz as well. But Georgia Tech, a really good landing spot for Dylan Loy. Confused as to how that all went down, as we discussed when it happened, but good landing spot for him and wishing him the best. And then on the flip side of that, Tegan Kuhns wrapped up his appearance in the Cape Cod on Sunday night with another dominant performance. He'll now head down to Tennessee and get to work early with Quentin Eberhardt. And I feel like the best thing that came from this is just the confidence aspect of it for Tegan, with how his freshman season did not end the way that he would have wanted it to. 13 innings in the Cape Cod, 20 strikeouts, 2 walks. That, my friend, will play. So your thoughts on Dylan Loy going to Georgia Tech and how important this summer can be for Tegan Kuhns with what he did in the Cape?
Yeah, well, first, Georgia Tech was a postseason team this year. Longtime head coach Danny Hall, final season, he's retiring. The guy they brought in, they're really excited about. Young, kind of was the coach in waiting. I'm blanking on his name, of course. But Georgia Tech returns a lot offensively, and it's going to be a team a lot of people are excited about for next year. So first of all, that's a huge get for them because
James Ramsey,
that's right. They've got a couple nice portal pieces alongside Dylan Loy. They got Appenzeller, who Tennessee was linked to early on, the middle infielder from Cal. And it's a really good school, good conference in the ACC. I think Loy will have an opportunity to start there. Makes a lot of sense. Tegan Kuhns going up to the Cape and pitching well is so huge. Just how many guys, Ben, have you seen over the years just catapult themselves and parlay a awesome Cape season into a phenomenal draft year? I mean, it generates buzz because you're going up there, you're facing the best hitters in college, albeit with a wood bat. It's the premier college baseball league, right? And it's a true showcase of a ton of talent. And it's a good environment because you're just around really, really good players. And so for him to go up there and perform, huge confidence boost for him, leads him into, the opportunity to take a huge step forward back in Tennessee's program as a sophomore. And I think that's one of those things where the coaching staff sees it. He knows they see it. Everybody feels better going into the fall, having had a ton of success in the Cape Cod League. So there's nothing more to dissect there. It's just, that's an awesome league to go do it in. And, history tells us if you do well in the Cape, you're usually set up for a big year after it. And so, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed, but it's definitely a positive sign for Tennessee. And I think it solidifies Kuhns as kind of that early front runner to be one of the starting 3, which we've said multiple times means absolutely nothing right now, but it's nice to have him slated in there if you're looking ahead, because you can see the talent, and that's the results that we can expect from Kuhns when he's right, pitching well, pitching confident, and kind of getting those opportunities and running with them.
And lastly, before we do get to Joe Doyle and catch a quick timeout, still feel that Tennessee needs another bullpen piece or two and a middle infielder. That's where I'm at. I want to see them add Brody Purcell, the USC kid, who is still taking a couple of visits. I believe Florida State and Georgia, when I checked this morning, were the 2 schools he was still set to visit. Brody Purcell, the reliever from USC, who I think that would be a heck of addition. I know he's not a lefty, but sign me up even if he's not a lefty. Yeah. But if you can't get him then at least one more lefty. I think that's a no doubter. And then another middle infielder, which, speaking of the devil, Finley Bates is a transfer from San Diego State. He has popped up for a target for Tennessee as a middle infielder. He was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year last season, not this past season, but in 2024, he was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year. Not a power hitter, only 4 home runs in 432 at-bats, but within those 432 at-bats, he is a career 296 hitter. So a different profile, but hey, Tennessee could use another piece up the middle, and I think if you could go add another lefty, land Purcell as kind of a best available type, and that still checks your bullpen, helps your bullpen, and then go find a middle infielder. I think you're feeling really good about where Tennessee stands.
Well, the San Diego State park is massive. So 4 home runs there. I mean, seriously, we played there in 17, which is my freshman year, and I didn't see one come close. I saw Benito Santiago, who had a lot of pop, absolutely torch a baseball and hit off the center field wall. And I thought it was, 500 feet. I thought it was way gone. So anyways, maybe there's a little more pop there than the numbers would show. Maybe not. I don't know. Haven't seen him. But sign me up for former player of the year, freshman player of the year. I'm good with the middle infielder, but, we've harped on it. We said 2 last week. You got 1 lefty. Give me another lefty in the portal. Obviously, Purcell is a really high caliber, high leverage arm, so we'll take him if we're able to land him. But pretty simple. I mean, we're getting down to it. Things have kind of come together nicely. I think Tennessee's put together a phenomenal recruiting class, portal class, not just from a ranking and player profile standpoint, but team needs standpoint. They've done exactly what they needed to do. Knew what they, it's pretty obvious what they wanted to address. They addressed it, and things are shaping up nicely headed into the fall. So they got room to tie it together with a couple nice cherries on top. But they're in a good spot, and be interesting to see kind of if any other names come out over the next week or so, or if anybody commits. I think you're probably right in, 2 more to round out the class, a pitcher for sure, and then probably an infielder would be nice.
I think they could sneak 3 in. I think they could get 2 more bullpen arms, which I think they should absolutely do, and I think they'll be able to sneak a middle infielder in here. But we will see. We are 6 days away from the draft. The first 3 rounds will be on Sunday night, and then rounds 4 through 20 will all be in one day, a week from today, next Monday. So we will be quite busy next Sunday and Monday. I have something personal going on later this week, so Will and I will try to get back on here and hammer out a preview of the draft. We will make that happen. I just don't know when that will happen, so be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, speaking of the draft, we're going to get somebody in here who knows everything you need to know. The best person to have on for the MLB draft is Joe Doyle, and he's going to join us on the other side of this quick timeout here on the Diamond Vols Podcast at GoVols247.com. Welcome back into the Diamond Vols Podcast on GoVols247.com. I am Ben McKee, and I am joined by former Tennessee pitcher Will Heflin, and now joined by Joe Doyle of Future Star Series. And I can't wait to dive into Joe's brain. Anybody who has been following the podcast the last couple of years has always left rave reviews after Joe joins us because he has a wealth of knowledge as it pertains to the MLB draft. So before we dive into our conversation with him, I would like to encourage you, wherever you find your Go Vols 24/7 podcast, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review, that helps us in a major way, and we would greatly appreciate that. Joe, how are you doing, my friend?
Man, positive comments, rave reviews on my appearances. Like, who do I need to pay?
Will Heflin. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, I had 2 or 3 people reach out to me within the last couple of days, and hey, when's Joe coming on? You gonna be able to get Joe on? I was like, yes, I'm gonna do my best to make it happen. So your appearance
always there for you guys. Always there for you guys. I love this podcast.
Yeah, we love you. You do great work over with the Future Star Series. Keep up year round. Read your mocks and your draft boards and everything. You do a great job. So appreciate you giving some of your time this week, as we know it's a busy time of the year for you. I want to lead off with what I feel is the biggest storyline for Tennessee going into this weekend with the draft, and that's the pair of high school lefties that Tennessee has signed, and Kruz, Schoolcraft, and Cameron Appenzeller. It seemed back in the fall it was a foregone conclusion that both were going to sign, but now not as certain, especially with Appenzeller. Just where are you at in terms of their signability, but also just your thoughts on those guys as pitchers?
Yeah, man, I think, oh boy, I, in the fall, I would have said, I don't think you're getting either one of these guys. Like, there's no chance. And now I would put it at like, y'all might have like a 15% chance, 20% chance of getting both of them. At this point, I mean, Appenzeller is interesting, right? Because he plays basketball. He didn't really get to pitch until the middle of April, the end of April. And that's when he got back on the mound and started working back into his routine. And from everyone that I've talked to, everything I've heard, he was mostly like 89 to 92 throughout most of the spring. And, it's hard for a major league organization to spend, $2.5–3 million on a guy throwing 89 to 92. Now you've seen it. You've seen Appenzeller 93 to 95. He's done it. But when he doesn't do it in the spring leading up to his draft, there's obviously some apprehension there. Schoolcraft also kind of all over the board, right? Up to 99 at times. There was starts this year where he was 91 to 94. Split fingers, disgusting. Breaking ball is taking some jumps, but he doesn't really throw it too often. I think the biggest question here with both of these guys is, one, teams are going to be willing to pay him, but what is their number going to be? I think in this era of NIL and boosters and, university funded, bonuses for these players, like without knowing how much these players are being offered to come to school, I've heard numbers thrown around that I won't say on the podcast, but without knowing what they're being offered, it's hard to know how strong their commitment is. I'll say this: if either one of these guys gets offered $4 million, they would be silly to walk away from it to go to Tennessee. Nothing against Tennessee, but I've heard from inside of that program that coaches are confident they're going to land both of them.
Where are you at, before I turn it over to Will, where are you at with Kruz as a hitter? Is that even on the professional radar, or is that just the two-way thing, more of a college thing right now?
More of a high school thing for Kruz. Yeah, huge power, but there was a ton of swing and miss from Kruz across the course of the last 12 months. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they let him hit in the fall and then they decide, hey, this kid's 94 to 98 right now, and he could pencil in on Tuesdays or Sundays. Let's not let him hit. Let's stop this. Like, Marcus Phillips was a right fielder, guys, and then he was 97 to 100. So at the end of the day, you got to protect these guys from themselves at certain points.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I wanted to ask you about Ford, because he's kind of the highlight piece of the Tennessee transfer portal class. And then, for those that haven't followed him super closely, has a just unbelievable freshman year at Virginia, broke the freshman home run record. Power numbers a little bit down this year, but average was up. Defensively, there's some questions on kind of maybe where he would play or get drafted as, but it's a big power right-handed bat. I think going into it, Tennessee knew, hey, if we even commit this guy, he might sign in the draft. Do you have any insight on maybe where he's projected, or kind of what his threshold would be? Is like, hey, if he falls below here, Tennessee's got a real good shot.
Yeah, I think if he falls out of the second round, Tennessee's got a pretty good shot. I have him in the second round. I have him in the 65 to 85 range. I will say one thing that Henry Ford has going for him is, if I reflect back on the season, and this is not going to be exact, but I don't think he had a home run in like the first 4 weeks. Maybe he had one home run in the first 4 weeks. He ends up with 11, so he gets a little bit hot down the stretch. He's got a very mechanical swing. It's a lot of moving parts, long levers, big body that has to be synced up for him to backspin the baseball. And he got it figured out there late in the season. And, I think you make a very important point, Will. Where is this guy going to play, right? He comes to Virginia as a third baseman. They shift him to first base because they had too many options on the left side of the infield. They try him in right field. It's not great. They move him back to first base this season as a sophomore. What's the plan at Tennessee? Are you going to play him at third base? Are you going to play him at first base? Is he Andrew Fischer 2.0? Where are we going to go with this? But to answer your question more succinctly, I think if he gets out of the top 75 picks, it's kind of difficult for a major league organization to scrounge together the amount of money that I think it's going to require Henry Ford to get him away from his third year. That people forget Henry Ford is a second-year player. He's
Right.
eligible as a true sophomore, so he's got some leverage. And you put him in the SEC, you put him in, in the burnt orange, and who knows what can happen. So I would say the second round is where you can begin to start drawing the line.
Out of the current crop of Vols that are about to be drafted, there's so many cool development stories with, you mentioned Andrew Fischer and Liam Doyle and Gavin Kilen coming over and seeing an increase in power, Marcus Phillips. So many great development stories. I would say AJ Russell from where he was coming out of high school. Well, which one is your favorite, and which one are you most curious to kind of see where they land in the draft?
Yeah, can I just save my reputation really quick and take back the burnt orange statement? I said burnt orange. When that came out of my mouth, I was like, oh no, I'm certainly gonna get canceled for that. So that was a mistake on my part. Rocky Top. My favorite development story. I mean, I think as you look at it's kind of amazing that everybody that Tennessee has brought on has taken a step, right? I mean, that's not always the case. Even Dalton Bargo this year took a big step after being a little bit quiet in 2024. I think it would be impossible not to speak on Liam Doyle turning into a guy throwing 101. I mean, that's crazy. Like that's crazy. I mean, he's 6'2", 220. He put on good weight. He put on good strength. But we're talking about a guy that was like brushing, tickling 97, and it was like 90 to 93 at Coastal, and a little bit better than that at Ole Miss. And then, you get him into this program, and he's just turned into this souped up monster machine, best pitcher in the country at times. So he would probably be the low hanging fruit, and probably the guy that you need to speak highly on. But, I do want to bring up Dalton Bargo a little bit, because I was really high on him coming into 2024. He couldn't find a role. He couldn't find an established position, and he really kind of slotted nicely this year in left field and provided a little bit of offensive impact that they might not have been expecting. So Doyle and sleeper pick Dalton Bargo.
I think my favorite guy the whole year, and kind of could be in that sleeper category going into the draft. He's been included in some tweets or maybe an article about maybe being a bit under the radar, but Brandon Arvidson, who is just the definition of projectable, and then comes on really late, has a phenomenal outing against Texas in the SEC tournament. Speaking of burnt orange, sorry.
Ouch.
It's not a big deal. I get roasted on here all the time for my former Kevin O'Sullivan fandom. I disavowed him after his interesting regional antics. But anyways, that's beside the point. Brandon Arvidson, one of my favorite guys the whole year. I could see him going, surprisingly high, or maybe he, falls into the mid rounds. It just depends on, kind of what team and where they see him fitting in. But what have you seen? Kind of what's been the talk on him? Because I know it kind of went from like super quiet to his postseason outings. He was certainly had to jump on some people's radar.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It was like, hey, this is a guy that, 6'5", left-handed, having a good, not like spectacular year for Tennessee. And then those last like 4 weeks, it went from, all right, this is a 7th, 8th, 9th rounder to, oh, this might be a 6th rounder to, oh, if we don't take this guy in the 4th round, is he going to be gone? Like, I had to do a much deeper dive on Brandon Arvidson down the stretch, because at some point you look at his baseball card and it's like, this guy has 70 strikeouts in 36 or some odd innings. Like, he's striking out 2 an inning. How did this sneak by us? But I think Brandon Arvidson might have the best slider in the country that nobody is talking about. Like, I'm not saying it's the best slider in the country, but this dude launches the ball from the moon. Like, it's one of the highest release heights I've evaluated in several years, and he still is able to generate this monster depth on this bullet slider. And he gets whiffs, he gets chase, and he threw it for strikes like 70% of the time this season. So I think if there's a team that believes Brandon Arvidson has a chance to start at the next level. 38 innings isn't nothing this season. If someone believes he can start at the next level, you could hear Arvidson sneak into the third round or maybe the fourth round, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. It just takes one, right? It only takes one team to say Brandon Arvidson is the best prospect as we've graded out on the board right now. We're going to take him. I think he probably goes in the 5th or 6th round. The 3rd round is probably his peak, but there will certainly be calls being made, I think, for Brandon Arvidson in the 4th.
As we sit here 6 days out from the draft, what is your projection of where Liam Doyle lands, and where do you kind of have him in the pecking order of Cade Anderson, Jamie Arnold, and the couple of prep pitchers?
So I have Liam Doyle a hair behind Cade Anderson, a hair. And the only reason is because of the delivery. I just, it's a high effort delivery. It's a high octane motor. He throws the front hip open hard and aggressively and early. And I just, you don't conventionally see guys that move like that start at the next level. Not saying it's not going to happen. I actually do think he's going to start, but there's some tinkering that I think needs to be done with Liam Doyle to get him where he needs to be. I have him 5th on my draft board. I don't know where he goes. I think he could go 2. I think he could go 3. I think he could go 4, although that would make less sense to me. And then beyond that, I mean, he fits any number of these organizations. The Cardinals would love a player like that. I think the Pirates would love a player like that. I think who else we got? The Rangers at 12. I don't think he lasts that long, but they would love a player like that, right? So to answer your question, I have him at 5. I think he could go as high as 2. I've heard teams love him all over the top 10, but it's a weird year where player 1 through player 8 in this draft are all separated by next to nothing, and it really depends on the organization you ask as to how they have them stacked up.
Okay, this one may be a little tougher, but there's 3. You touched on Bargo. I want to throw Chapman and Cannon Peebles in that bucket. 3 guys that I don't think anybody would be surprised if they do get drafted. 3 guys, maybe if they slide out and end up back at Tennessee, wouldn't be, super surprising either. Is there a round range or maybe just a % chance that they don't go in the draft for each of those 3 guys?
I have Chapman and Peebles both in the 8th and 9th round right now. So I think the thing that, we touched on NIL, depending on how Vitello values a guy like Reese Chapman or how he values a Cannon Peebles, you could scrounge up $150,000 to keep these guys for one more year in the SEC. There's a lot of money in college baseball. The money in college baseball in the SEC isn't as outlandish and outrageous as people seem to think it is. But, if Cannon Peebles has the choice between signing with the Philadelphia Phillies in the 9th round for $200,000 or returning to Tennessee for $150,000 and putting his name in the draft in 2026, I think he would go back to school. And I think Reese Chapman is kind of in the same boat. I'm surprised it didn't really click for Reese Chapman this year. At one point, I had him in my top 150 coming into this season because there is tools and raw power there that you can really dream on. And it didn't really all come together like it did for Max Williams and, at Florida State. Very, very similar players. But if Reese returns to school, I think he could have a breakout like Max Williams and put himself into that, 4th or 5th round in 2026. So it's a coin flip for me. I think they're both back of the quote unquote day 2 range. And I think they're both like 200 to 225K players.
Where are you at with AJ Russell and Marcus Phillips?
They're not going to last long. They're not going to be there in the 8th round. I think so. The AJ Russell thing frustrates me because I think if he was used on the timeline he should have been used and not thrown in that one game to start for 1 inning and then sat for 4 weeks, I think if that wouldn't have happened and they would have ramped him up on a normal schedule, he goes in the top 25. But the baseball card is so shallow this year, and while it was good, he never even had a chance to show the slider. I mean, nobody really knows where it's at. So there are things that AJ Russell can do on a mound that nobody can do. I mean, he's 6'6". He generates over 7 feet of extension. He launches from a 58-inch release point, which is 10 inches lower than the major league average, and he still holds a vert on the fastball. Like it's outrageous what he's able to do. But giving a guy like that $3.5 million, I think he's going to be someone's early pick in round 2. I think he's going to go 35 to 50. I think Marcus Phillips goes a handful of picks above that. I would put Marcus Phillips in the 25 to 35 range.
It's a big time athlete. But
big time athlete, maybe the best athlete in the class. And I'm not even being sarcastic or exaggerative. I think Marcus Phillips has a case to be like the best pure athlete in the class. I got my hands on his force plate testing, his jumps. He's a freak. Like Marcus Phillips is a freak. The ground force that he can create on the mound is next to none.
I think he was a big basketball player too, if I'm correct, in high school, Ben. What about Fischer? That's a very interesting one because we talked about, they moved him from third. He played first this year, had his best year offensively. It's that power and on-base percentage that seems to be the trend for professional hitters. So everybody knows they're drafting the bat. Is there any chance, maybe the same for Dean Curley, that somebody would say, okay, we want this bat and we may move them to corner outfield in pro ball? Or, do they stay corner infield? And kind of where do you see them going?
I think whoever drafts Fischer is going to give him a chance somewhere else. I mean, you don't want to lock him in at first base and take away the chance of having a little bit more value at the next level. It really is the Michael Busch type of a situation, right? He gets comped to
North
Michael
Carolina
Busch.
kid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he gets comped to Michael Busch. And Michael Busch kind of floundered in the minor leagues, I believe, with the Dodgers for a long time, and they never were able to find a position for him. But he goes and gets traded to the Cubs, and he's a starter from day one. I think, I wrote an article about this a couple of weeks ago. Unlike Busch, I think Fischer has an argument to be the first position player from this class to reach the major leagues. Like, I think he could be there in May of 2026. It's just so polished. Like, he has healthy swing rates, minuscule chase rates, super high contact rates, both inside and outside of the zone. It's above average raw power. He's lifting the ball already. Like, everything is there. He's not doing anything poorly, and he's doing everything in the SEC. So if he just translates his college production into the pro game, it's the most polished bat that's available this year. Unfortunately, it's at first base. I think if someone believes in him at third base or left field, like I look at a team like the Orioles who are so model driven, I could see him going as early as, the Brewers, the Twins, the Orioles in that 17, 18, 19 range. But he's going to be a priority for someone because, especially in this draft where you're looking for floor and you're looking for probability, I think Andrew Fischer is one of the best bets to hit in this class.
Is Gavin Kilen a shortstop or a second baseman? And where is Nate Snead and Dean Curley's stock after this past season? I know that's a lot, so if I need to remind you, I will.
Let's start with Kilen. I think in the low minors and probably through high A, he's going to play shortstop. You give him the chance to hold on to that athleticism as long as you can. He played a decent shortstop down the stretch. I mean, Tennessee rotated all sorts of guys into the shortstop position. Kilen ended up there a lot at the end of the year and looked pretty good doing it. I think Kilen is probably going to play shortstop, and whether or not he plays shortstop or left field or second base or third base as a pro, that's all going to be dictated by the organization and the farm system that he's surrounded by. I think Kilen probably goes anywhere between 11 and 20 in this draft, and he's another high probability type of guy. I think Dean Curley's athleticism backed up on him this season. He wasn't moving as well as he did last year. He's a little bit heavier footed. Was streaky at second base. Was streaky at third base. I think his stock is, from where it was entering the season, it is down a little bit. But again, I don't think Dean Curley gets past pick 50, 55. Maybe he's going to be a priority pick for someone early in the second round. And then Nate Snead actually, I think, opened up some eyes at the combine. Everyone knows that he throws hard, but he did have some interesting pitch shapes with the pro ball, which is important because it's a very different ball than the professional ball. So The fact that he showed well at the combine, I think you could hear Nate Snead's name picked in the 3rd or 4th round, but there's relief risk there, and I don't think that can be totally discounted.
Will, do you have any more on your mind before I wrap us up?
What about Bargo?
Bargo, I have in the same conversation as Peebles and Reese Chapman. I've seen Keith Law has him quite a bit higher in the 2nd or 3rd round. I personally haven't heard that. I haven't seen that from Bargo. I haven't seen it in his data. I haven't heard it from anybody. But let's split the difference. If Keith Law is onto something, and I think a different way, maybe Bargo goes in the 6th or 7th round from a team. But again, I think there's a better chance than not that Bargo returns to school in the same vein as what Chapman and Peebles are dealing with.
Wanted to ask.
I got one more. Gotta give you a tough one before we let. It's been a couple softballs. It is funny. You have to talk about a lot more Tennessee guys nowadays than you did half a decade ago. So it's you get a lot more eyes on that brighter orange than maybe when I was first.
I got a tough one back for you, by the way.
Hanging out over there. All right. Outside of Carlson, Schoolcraft, and Appenzeller, who is maybe a guy from the signing class that doesn't have a ton of draft buzz, but you think makes it to school and ends up being a big development type guy and really has first round upside that makes it to school, or maybe somebody that could go higher out of high school and Tennessee loses that maybe they aren't planning on losing?
That's a good question. Guys that I like, I've heard a lot of teams really like Ethan Moore, the second baseman out of essentially Chicago, Illinois. I watched Ethan Moore at area code games last summer, and it's kind of a funny story. 3 games, I think it was 9 plate appearances. He saw 9 pitches. He saw 9 fastballs. He put 9 balls in play, and he had 7 hits. Like it was kind of the crazy thing. Like me and all the scouts are sitting around there going, is someone going to flip Ethan Moore a breaking ball pitch 1, or are they just going to let him continue to bang like up through the gaps everywhere? So he is on the kind of the smaller side, switch hitter, 5'11", second base profile. But if you wanted to dream on a guy that could turn into Gavin Kilen in due time, I think he would be it. The two small school transfers, the Matt Barr and the Mason Estrada types, I'm sure that they have a decent amount of NIL coming their way. They were just okay at the combine, and I think they've both gone from guys that, these guys could be 3rd rounders to I'm hearing more 5th and 6th round at this point on those 2 guys. So you get them into the organization, especially a guy like Matt Barr, who's got the enormous size and the low slot and the big fastball. You get a guy like that into the AJ Russell mold, and maybe he could explode. But I'll give you one more just because I think it's interesting. He's not talked about because he didn't play all that much for a number of reasons. It wouldn't totally stun me if Blake Grimmer got drafted and paid, not paid a ton of money, but enough to say like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to get the run in 2026 necessary to improve my draft stock a whole bunch. So here's the team offering me $250,000 to go pro. Maybe I take it. Just a kind of a sleeper for the draft. I think Grimmer's got some really interesting testing and metrics, and he did some good things when he was on the field. So don't be surprised if you lose Grimmer.
How about that, Hef? How about that for your fastball up and in, huh?
That's a good answer. We're Grimmer fans. So what's my tough question? Hit me.
That was it. I mean, you were like, hey, I've been giving you softball after softball. Here's the fastball. And I come in with the big hanger. Just, hey, here's Blake Grimmer going pro.
Got you. That was your response is the heater. I misunderstood that.
It's an attack and a counterattack.
Now that you say it, it wouldn't surprise me. But had you not said it, I would have been like, whoa. But that is somebody we think if he makes it back, he'll find an everyday spot in the lineup as that power lefty bat. So hopefully he feels the same way. For us as, Tennessee fans, we would like to see him one more year in orange and then go make his money. But
he can bang. That kid can really hit. He just couldn't find a full-time role.
2 rapid fire questions for you. I'm going to throw a couple of transfer names out at you, and if anything rings a bell, just say something. Clay Edmondson, DJ Newman, Evan Blanco. Just asking mostly because they're simply draft eligible.
Yeah, I think Clay Edmondson is definitely going to end up at school. Really interesting pitch metrics, but it's kind of a one-trick pony. There are 2 pitches there, but it's a relief profile. He's probably getting a decent little payday from Tennessee, or at least enough to cover, the expenses of moving and things like that. He'll end up at school. He is on my draft board, but he doesn't have a bat missing fastball. He's just got a really interesting metrically. I think he's the cutter guy with a really deep cutter. So he's going to end up at school, I think. Who was the other one that you said? Oh, so DJ Newman is interesting. I had him in my top 250 as the spring entered, but he's been really beat up at Bowling Green, and two-way guy, can play center field, can pitch. I hope he ends up at school. I think he is going to end up at school. I mean, he was limited again this year. So I think he's going to end up at school, and I have no idea how Tony Vitello is going to use that kid. He's tooled up. He just can't stay healthy. Who was the last one? Blanco is interesting. I would expect him to end up at school. He didn't have the year that he expected to have it. I think it was Virginia. So yeah, I would expect him to compete for the Sunday role at Tennessee, and at worst be the 4, 5, 6 inning guy on weekends and start on Tuesdays.
Who's your favorite of Levi Clark, Jay Abernathy, Manny Marin, and Chris Newstrom? There's my fastball for you.
That's not even fair. Those are such different players. Like, they're so different players, but I think anybody that doesn't say Levi Clark is just wrong.
There you go. We could throw Tegan Kuhns, Anson Seibert in there. So
you throw Tegan Kuhns in there, and I think you have a conversation. But I think Levi Clark and Tegan Kuhns both look like first rounders.
How can everybody follow your draft coverage this week as we get ready for the draft on Sunday and Monday?
Yep. So Joe Doyle MILB on Twitter. You can find my written stuff at futurestarseries.com. Top 615 prospects drops on Wednesday, and a couple of mock drafts still to go. And then we turn over the lineup card and do it again in 26, boys.
Joe, we greatly appreciate your time. You're awesome.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
For Joe Doyle and Will Heflin, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the Diamond Vols Podcast on GoVols247.com.